Hi, everyone. Great to see you again. Sorry about that slight delay in starting. We just had a couple of things to check. Welcome to Membership Voice. I'm Kerro O'Shea, the coordinator of The Voice and the host for this evening's webinar. Sadly, we have an apology from past RI Director Stephanie Urchick, who was to present tonight, but I'm delighted to welcome our international club builder extraordinaire, past Governor Tom Gump. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing just fine. I hope you are today.
I am. Thank you, Tom. But as is our tradition, it's very important at this stage to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm hosting tonight's webinar. I acknowledge the strength of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I acknowledge the strength of their continuing culture and offer my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The presentation we've all been waiting for is your Club Culture Toxic, to be presented by past Governor Tom Gump. Over to you, please, Tom.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I couldn't be more excited to be on Membership Voice. And it's an interesting topic we're talking about today. You know, the last time you had me on, Kiro, you wanted me to talk about the mistakes I've made in starting new clubs. Well, it's interesting when you talk about starting new clubs, that's exciting like a race car. When you talk about club culture, this is kind of what every club needs. You know, Rotary happens at the club level, and we have to know what our culture is about. Because if our culture aligns well with our values, then everything works well. We raise money for the foundation, we bring in more people, we do great public image. But if there's a disconnect between our culture and our values, then it doesn't work so well. We start losing members. So what is culture and why is it important? Well, culture is the unwritten rules that run any organization. It's interesting because when you think about culture, it has different meanings for different people. In the US, when I say Southern culture, people think of fried chicken and sweet tea. You know, you think of corporate culture, you think of something else. So I'd like to start out with a quick exercise. Can everyone just cross your arms? Okay. Now switch your right and left arm to a different position, the opposite of what we just did. Now, Warren, how did that make you feel when you did that?
It was easy enough because I've done it before.
Ah, he's done it before. What about Glenda? When you did that, how did it make you feel?
Uncomfortable.
It did. It made me feel uncomfortable, kind of like when my wife makes me take yoga classes. So changing culture is difficult because when you change culture, you have to change people. So why is it important to do this? Well, you know, our last Rotary survey, Rotary International, what we did was we asked, what's the number one reason people leave Rotary? And we found out that it's a club culture. And it's interesting because you think of when we lose people, we lose 10% of people in the first year that they join. We lose just over 52% within the first 3 years. So we need to get our culture right. If we get people feeling comfortable, they'll stay and they'll bring in more people. So how do we know what our culture is? Well, it's pretty easy. What we can do is we can do an assessment. An assessment tells you if there needs to be a change, because if everything's going well, there may not be any change necessary. It'll also tell you why we need to change, especially if it's an open-ended assessment, an open-ended survey, because people will tell you why they don't feel comfortable. And it also can give you hints on how to change it. So Rotary has 6 different assessment tools. It could be as simple as if you have a small club with just 20 people in it, you could just pick up the phone and call people. If you have a club of over 400, then you may have to use a written assessment. Now, Rotary, if you go to My Rotary and you type in health check is for more of the board of directors of a club. If you do membership satisfaction survey, then that's more for your members. And you don't have to use the Rotary forms. If you feel they're too verbose and you feel like there's just too many things being asked, you could do a simple Survey Monkey, put in your own words and just send it out to your club. Now, if you want to, you could just ask a few simple questions. You could ask them, do you like our meetings? Do you like where we meet, how we meet? Do you like our socials? Do you like what we do for service projects? And then you'll get those answers. And it's interesting, whether we do it here online, virtually, or you do it in person, there's usually about 5% of individuals taking the survey who say they're dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. But when you drill down as to why they're dissatisfied, it's usually something pretty easy, something pretty simple to change. A lot of individuals don't like waking up at 7:30 in the morning, like I need to make my club meeting on Tuesday mornings, which is okay because it's only 4 a.m. here, so I'll be able to make it this morning. So when you gather this information, you should ask yourself, when's the appropriate time to gather it? Most clubs, when we ask them, do you do surveys? Most say no. And then when we ask when they do a survey, most clubs survey when somebody's leaving. Well, Rotarians are pretty nice people, and they might not give you the honest answer as to why they're leaving if they're about walking out the door. And also, you can't make a change to keep those people. So you may want to consider what RI President-elect Jennifer Jones is telling us to do, and that's to do entrance surveys. Find out what people want. When it comes down to it, Rotary is like any other business. We're delivering a product. And the product that we're delivering is the club experience. So if we deliver what we promise, we'll keep our members when they come in. So you should consider doing that. Now, the official stance of RI is you should do a survey about once a year. So you do the survey and you find out maybe we can change something. Maybe change the time, maybe change the place, maybe start up a satellite club, use that flexibility. But what happens if you find a group that just doesn't want to change at all? They're just stuck in their ways. And let's face it, a lot of our clubs have been around for 116 years and more. I once heard it said that it's easier to give birth than to raise the dead. Now, I haven't done either myself, but I think that's sometimes true. So if you find a club, and we're built on the traditional club, we stand on the shoulders of people who came before us. I would never leave my traditional club. I love it. But if you find a group of individuals who want to do something different, then maybe it's time to start a new club. The hard part is when you start making a change, you get the moment that's called the freeze. And that's where people just freeze as a club or an individual, and they don't know what to do. This is a dangerous position to be in because we need to adapt. And if we don't adapt, we may lose a lot of people. And if you lose enough people, then the club's going to go away. So when you do this, try to find out who the club influencers are. You're not going to be able to change everybody, but if you find out the influencers, you can nurture the other people as you go through the process. So if you find that your club doesn't want to change at all, and you have people who want to do something different, you could start a new club. New clubs help grow Rotary quicker. They retain members longer. It attracts younger and more diverse people. It reaches out in the community, and you have opportunities to partnership. And we can talk about those things at another time, in another session. But the main thing to remember in this culture transformation is that it's not hard to start a new club if you find that there's enough people who want to change, but you can't get the whole club to move on with the change. And there are people there to help you do it. We have Rotary coordinators, assistant Rotary coordinators. You have your DGs. I see DGE Tari on the line. She could help you start a new club. But when you're doing this, one thing to do is you need to get buy-in from your club members. And that'll help you make sure that the proposition gets through, the change gets through, and it's sustainable. So how do you get buy-in? Well, you have to involve your members in the change. Nobody can make a change in a club by themselves. You have to ask for suggestions. And when you do that survey, people are going to appreciate being asked. And if you make a few changes, they're going to appreciate that you listen to them. It also is engaging them so they feel that they have a part of this change. Now, to make a change, sometimes you need to find that spark plug. These are the people that have that gumption, the people who, and you know who they are. They're the ones that are going to make a change and make sure that other people are going to be brought along in the process. And it's interesting, you don't have to make big changes in your club. You don't have to make all the changes all at once. I was at a president-elect training seminars a few years back, and I went around and asked the president-elects, what one change are you going to make? And I remember there was a gentleman from my district, a couple hours north of me, and his name was Troy. And I always remember as Troy the pie guy, because Troy's one change he wanted to make was he wanted to have pie for dessert because he didn't like the desserts. Well, it's interesting because a couple years later, I asked Troy if he got his pie, and he did. But a funny thing happened when he made that small change. People started thinking, well, maybe there's other things we can change. So sometimes it's good to start with a small change and incorporate that in so people get used to making changes before you make bigger changes. So your spark plug, they have high energy, they like results, they have that optimism. So those are what you look for in your club members when you're about to make a change. So Rotary has a great change model, and this was first introduced at the International Assembly last year. So when we talk about the change model, it's a process that's continuous, because when you do that assessment and then you make a change, then you have to reassess to see if the change is going well and what other changes you may have to make. So I just want to briefly talk about a few of these. So assessing is basically asking, what is the problem in our club? When you do that survey, what do people want to change? What makes them unhappy? What makes them dissatisfied? When you understand what that change needs to be, then you could start painting a picture to the club as to why you need to make that change. So the designing is actually coming up with a plan and actually telling the club, communicating with them what the change needs to be and why the club is going to be better after the change is made. Then you have to build it. You communicate with your stakeholders. And this isn't just your club members. This is anyone involved in your club. It might be youth exchange people. It actually might be host families. It might be the service providers. It might be the nonprofits that you are helping serve. If you're part of a Rotary Community Corps, it might be that. But you have to create a communication plan, because you can't just make a change and make it, automatically accepted. You need to communicate why you're making the change, and you need to keep on communicating it. And the great thing about this model is if you feel like it's not being accepted, you could go backwards a little bit in the model, and you could decide whether or not to communicate and who maybe you should add to the communication team to get it through. Then you need to implement it. And this is important because when you implement the change, you're worrying about, or you're not worrying, you're being concerned for all your members. Many of you, I recognize, were at the International Convention, and we heard RI President-elect Jennifer Jones talking about caring for our members. When we implement this change, we have to care for our people. You may have that treasurer, let's say his name is Bob, and he's been treasurer for 35 years, and it's time to make a change and get a new treasurer. We got to think about Bob. Maybe we have Bob put together a training manual on how to train his successor, or maybe we move him over to the golf tournament or to the gala. So there's going to be people who are going to resist the change, but we have to make sure we nurture them as we go. And then we have to sustain the change. You don't want to make a change and then have it just go away. So it's important in your club to make sure it's not just the president, she or he, that's carrying the water. You want to make sure that the president-elect and the president nominee and your committee chairs are also working on it, because you're there for a year. And if you're DG, you're there for a year in that particular position. So you want to make sure that change lasts even when we're not in that position anymore. And then, of course, when the change is made, you need to communicate it to your members and potential members, just so that they're not shocked when it comes. So how do you get buy-in when you're making a change? This is important because you want to be supported. You want that change supported. So you start with the club influencers. You know who they are. Those are the ones who seem to be the thought leaders in your club. And you involve them in the process all the way through. Don't wait until just the end when you're trying to sustain it. Bring it in right after the assessment. And you don't have to make every change all at once. You can maintain a few, existing traditions. It's interesting. Different clubs along the spectrum. If you have a new club, it's got a certain culture. You have a club that's been around for 116 years. That's at the other end of the spectrum. The older a club is, the more traditions they have. And sometimes we may change a certain tradition. Our last council legislation just did away with the attendance requirement. Well, new clubs tend to not care about attendance requirement as much. However, some of these older clubs, let's say hypothetically, my father was in Rotary. My father wasn't, but if he was, and he had been in there 30 years and he was about to get 31 years of perfect attendance, maybe it's important to keep that. And how do you know which ones to keep, which traditions to keep, and which ones not? Again, the survey can help you there. Now, the one thing you have to be when you're a district governor or you're a president, if you're trying to transform the district or transform your club, it can be demotivating if you are too much of an individual who wants to get it done and get it done right now and not care about the other people's feelings. So don't overabuse your power. Make sure that you actually bring people along side by side when you're making the change. And the one thing you really need to do to make sure this goes really well is you need to keep diversity in mind, diversity of all kinds. If you have those different thought processes, you're actually more creative. You actually tend to weather storms in the club better. So the more diverse thought opinions we can have and the more diverse people we can have in our clubs, the better it reflects our overall community, the better off you're going to be. So the other thing is when you get the new club culture or you get those changes, what you need to do is you need to publicize them. You need to let the club members know how the club is better. And when you're starting out, if you're on your first change for a while in your club, what you can do is you can use examples from other clubs that have been successful by making changes to help paint the picture of what it could be like if you make that change. And these things can also work for virtual clubs. It doesn't have to be just in-person clubs. Really, you go through the same process when you're making a change in a virtual club as you would in an in-person club. So now comes the best time of the program is me answering your questions. So please throw them out there and be glad to answer them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Tom, your classmate, Andy Rajapakse, has done great work building new clubs here in Zone 8, and he's continuing on that process in the new year, which is great. He's emphasised the importance of good leadership in developing new clubs. So what part does good leadership play in this process?
That's an excellent question, and Andy does a remarkable job in building clubs in Zone 8. We've all been to those clubs that are vibrant. We know that a club excels when it has good leadership. If you have a good leader, they bring in more people. They engage more people. They raise more money. They do more service projects. The same is true when you're making a change. If you have strong leadership, you're able to better weather a change than you would be if you didn't have good leadership. And, part of good leadership is listening to those in your club. And, if you can, before you start your year as president, before you start your year as district governor, talk to as many people as you can, and start with the grumpiest people in your club. Before I was club president, I met and took some people to lunch and breakfast, and I started with the most grumpy person. And, it's interesting because he was upset because our club just didn't work on classifications, because in his mind, we didn't talk about what we did as our vocation for work. So on my first meeting, I let him give his 5 fun facts, which includes what he did for a living. And he stayed not grumpy for several months after that. So,
Warren Norton has a question about timing. Over to you, please, Warren.
Question is really not about any individual part of the change, but starting the process. I wonder whether Tom's found a better time in a Rotary year to get it going. Is it immediately after changeover? Is it leading up to changeover so that the new year is the start of it? Is there any particular time?
That's an excellent question, and thank you very much for asking it. And I think the answer is now is the best time. It's funny, here in the US, we have a tradition where our larger clubs, they do a gala once a year. So they will throw a fancy dinner, usually at a country club or a hotel, and they raise their money, not for the TRF, the Rotary Foundation, but for their club to do their projects for the year. And every year I hear the president say, I don't know if I can do that gala because we're getting less and less people, but everyone's afraid to make the change. So instead of bringing in the food trucks and making it casual, instead of renting those tuxes and going out, the presidents end up talking about it and they don't make the change. So I would say do it now. It's interesting because certain areas of the world, and Australia and North America are part of this, our membership is declining and people are in that freeze. Remember, we said that freeze where they don't know what to do. So what do? They default to doing the same thing they did before. Change it up, try something new. If it doesn't work, you can do something different. But I can tell you, you can't survive. No organization can survive for more than 117 years without making change. Thank you for the question.
Glenda has a question about the slides. Over to you, please, Glenda.
You couldn't have a thing with me on without asking at least one question. Look, the slides were very informative. Thank you very much. And I'm assuming that they will be made available through Kero. It really is interesting when you talk about these traditional clubs. I'm moved to regional Victoria and I'm about to join a club that's got their 100 years coming up next year, I think it is. And I've just come from a club that's about to celebrate their 60th year. And all of a sudden I'm realising that I've gone from the pot to the frying pan, if that's the right way to do it, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to, have a bit of a break. So I've asked a couple of questions about, I'm going to have trouble getting to the lunchtime meetings. Have you considered doing more night times? They have one nighttime meeting. And I got told point blank, no way in hell. I went, gee, that's really good to hear from a new member coming in, even though I've got plenty of experience in Rotary. So, yeah, it's really difficult when you've got these set ideologies of the members that have been there for a long time. And I know that the club that I'm leaving is seriously declining. I doubt that it'll be a charter club by the end of next year, but that's, they've got to deal with it. But I suppose that's a comment versus there's no real solution, is there, as to how you do deal with those grumpy members?
Glenda, thank you very much for that question. It's hard when someone gives you 20 minutes to try to take a whole topic and condense it.
Yeah.
But I wish I can say that your experience is an isolated incident, but it's not. It happens all over the world. And I can tell you, don't give up on making that change. Let me just, for instructive purposes, let me tell you a little story of two clubs in my district, two cities right next door. We had a club, the Egan Rotary Club. If a club does well, I use the name. If a club doesn't do well, I don't use the name. It's great that you're approachable. It's a shame that the leadership in your club may not be as approachable. But Egan, what they did is they had a bunch of young members, the young professionals, who wanted to meet at a different time. What the club did is they set up a satellite club. So the club that met in the morning at a standard time set up 8 individuals. That club, that satellite club, grew and grew and grew. It grew to such a point where it started its own club. That club recommended people to the traditional club. The traditional club recommended its adult children to that club, and they both grew. We had another club sitting next door, they had the same problem, but they decided, no, we're not going to do that. Well, so many people said, we want to change from this morning club to an afternoon, that they moved it. They lost a bunch of people instead of starting a satellite club. A year later, they changed it back. They lost more people. And now they're on the ropes. Maybe they won't even exist. But what I have to say is, our traditional clubs are wonderful. We wouldn't be here with 1.42 million members if it wasn't for them. But we need to give people what they want. If we had a club that fit everyone's schedule and everyone's needs and everyone's interests, we would have 1 billion members instead of just, 1.4. So try to get that satellite club started. And if not, maybe think about starting another club. But give your leadership a chance and bring in others to help you. We could bring stories like this all day long to your leadership and see if we can get them to change.
Thank you very much.
Don't give up.
Oh, I won't.
Please.
5 minutes.
Thanks, Glenda, and thanks, Tom. We've got a question there from past Governor Elaine over in New Zealand. Over to you, please, Elaine.
Thanks, Kiro. Kia ora, Tom. Sorry it's so early in the morning for you.
No problem.
Look, what methods do you recommend or have you used to manage where you've got fear of speaking up or out in a club? Even when, the club leaders might be saying, come on, inviting people to speak, but you've probably potentially got a strong, outspoken, opinionated member who's long serving, so, takes that entitlement. Have you got some kind of something in your toolbox about how you've managed with those before?
Yes, Elaine, and I can tell you're an experienced PDG because you asked a question that's very important. I would like to answer with a story, real life story, because I think it's instructive of what the answer is. People are sometimes afraid to speak out. So what you could do is you can actually do a survey, a simple survey, and ask them. Recently, Elaine, I had a president call me, this is a few months ago, and he said he was very worried. It was a small club, about 25 individuals, and he was afraid his club was going to go under because he said the club was half split because half wanted to do away with the 4-way test. Now, put aside that that's a council legislation issue and that kind of thing. He said half the people want to do away with it, half the people want to keep it. I said, well, why don't you do a survey? They come back to me and see what it says. It turns out that there were only 2 members out of the 25 that wanted to do away with it, but they were so vocal. But they were a small minority, but a very vocal minority. So just doing the survey, he was able to report back. We had 2 individuals want this. We listened to them by having the survey, but the majority of people want to keep the 4-way test, and it solved the problem. So much of this is just listening to people. And it may sound simple, but you just kind of have to do it. Do the assessment. And do the assessment that works for you. Like I said, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long. It could be informal, but do that assessment and then talk to the people individually who want to make the change and see if you can get more people with them. And sometimes when you get a group or a class together, they have more of a voice. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Tom. Another question from New Zealand, this time from past Governor Liz. Over to you, please, Liz.
Thanks, Kiro. Hi, Tom. Lovely to see you. Yes, I just wanted to talk about people who are our roadblocks in clubs. And no matter what you do, surveys, listening, no matter what you do, they're still going to keep it all very much the way that it was and not change anything. And they're the really vocal ones. Now, you've already probably partly answered this question with Glenda and Elaine, but is there anything else that you could do apart from leave the club and go and start another club altogether?
Well, Liz, that's a very insightful question. I'm really glad you asked it. There are individuals who are very strong-willed. We spend a lot of time today talking about we have to nurture everyone. But as a leader, you have to realize that the health of the organization depends on everyone's voice being heard. If there's someone who is so loud and domineering that she or he will not allow others to be heard, you may want to consider addressing that person individually. And there's been circumstances. There's one club I was dealing with last year. America, like much of the world, we're very divided when it comes politically, right? So this one particular female president only were brought in speakers of one particular ideology. And so people approached her and say, hey, can we have some kind of balance? Can we have some different speakers? And instead of saying, sure, or let's think about it, she said, I'm president. I'm going to do what I want to do. They lost 13 members. It was an 83-person club. So that president, after her year, she actually left the club because she got a job in a different state and had to relocate. Half of those members come back, and I see people's jaws dropping, and that does happen. What I want to say, Liz, is have the courage to ask a member to leave if that person is making everyone else uncomfortable. Because let's face it, they leave because they don't feel comfortable in their club. And we have people who stay. Like me and my club, I would never leave my club because I have lifelong friends there. But some people don't ask their friends and family to come join our club because they don't feel comfortable themselves. And if people don't feel comfortable, we have a bigger problem of worrying about keeping our numbers. We could lose our numbers. So sometimes you just have to have the courage to ask that person to leave. It's hard, but a good leader has to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Liz. District Membership Chair Johnny Dryden has a question for you, Tom.
Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. It's probably not so much a question, but we had some friction in the club that I was trying to establish a satellite club on. And I just want to commend all our past district governors, including you and the others that are on the call tonight, because they are very, very useful negotiators when you've got trouble in a club, particularly if you're hovering in as a helicopter pilot at the chair of the membership committee, because they can actually go in and negotiate stuff. And we've actually got a past district governor in a club that I'm dealing with at the moment, and he's put out a lot of fires since he's been asked to work on our behalf. And he's not even from our district; he's from another district, but he's been a member of this club for about 7 years. And nobody's asked him to do any work. And I just want to say, that sometimes we've got some really experienced people in clubs and we don't ask them to put their hand up, and they're incredible influences.
Johnny, that's such a good point. We need to use all the tools that we can. It's often said that there's no in-town expert, that all out-of-town people are the experts, and then you have to have a suitcase in order to be an expert. And sometimes bringing in an outside person from your district, but outside your club, adds a little dispassionate. And, when you're all so passionate about Rotary, but sometimes you have to be 95% passionate and 5% dispassionate so you can listen to the other side and let them know that you're being somewhat objective when you're doing that evaluation. And I definitely think bringing in an outsider sometimes, helps. And, you could read all these books when it comes to negotiation, Fisher, How to Get to Yes, all those things. But basically what works the best is everyone get together around a table or around a Zoom, put it all on the table and see what works. Sometimes that vocal minority may feel like changing more when they realize that everyone is thinking differently. Not always, but sometimes. So don't give up, Johnny, and keep on trying.
District Governor-elect Tari has a question for you.
Okay.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Liz, who's one of my most fabulous trainers at Virtual International Assembly. Thank you. And other people. So anytime you want to contact me, please do. I have an e-club that we launched just a year ago, and we're doing an end-of-year report on how everything went. And an end-of-year, first-year wrap-up. If anyone would like to get that, I never say, please, everybody give me your email, but you'll see my email on there. If you'd like to receive that, just shoot me an email. My email is tealtravel@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share with you all the successes and a couple of things that will change here too from our club. But the best part is, and it's not really a question, but thank you, Caro. It was a comment in there, but best thing is that our first president was, or still is, 24, and our incoming president is 25, and we have member range up to 70 plus. So it's certainly new ways are the way to go for many people. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tari.
And thank you, Tari, for starting that new club. And It's a great example of finding out what the people in your district want and delivering the product they want. So good job, Tari.
And I did have probably 20 naysayers when I launched it, but I had a very supportive district governor who said, go for it.
Wonderful. That's a lesson that I'll learn from.
Excellent. My club president, Alan, has a question for you about satellite clubs.
Thank you. It's been a great presentation, and club conflict has always been, and even in my professional life, conflict has been a part of my challenges in life. But one of the things you mentioned was setting up a satellite club. Have you experienced an online club setting up a satellite club? And was it another satellite club or was it a physical club? And how did they go?
So I have seen e-clubs start satellite e-clubs. I've never seen an e-club start an in-person club, though I've seen a lot of e-clubs do in-person service. It's hard to answer that question, Alan, because there are a lot of clubs that are starting up unofficial satellite clubs, and they don't file the paperwork, and they kind of do it halfway. So we don't have exact statistics as to exactly how many satellite clubs are growing. But I can tell you in my PRID zone, we have 23 districts. And the district right now that is growing the most is District 6000. And they have 2 PDGs who for the last 3 years have been going around, starting with the largest clubs and saying, you need to start satellite clubs. And they have been starting those satellite clubs, and they are not losing so many people, and they're gaining some people, because it's just adding that flexibility of giving people another option that better fits their schedule. So I'm a big fan of satellite clubs because I know that they work, but it works better if you file the official paperwork, and it's only 3 pages. Because when they do that, they have a feeling that it's their club, they have more ownership, they have more say, and it still counts towards the membership of the sponsoring club. The monies raised for TRF still go to the sponsoring club, but it allows them to do their own thing. We recently, just this past year, started a satellite club that is made of teachers in our Monticello club. So there's 8 teachers, and they meet at the same place, which is a hotel, but they meet in the evening because they can't get off of school during the day. And those meetings are so fun, even with 8 people. They get pizza or subs, and they just talk about things. It's a lot less formal. But I tell you, we would have lost most of those members if we didn't start that satellite club. So thank you, Alan, for asking that question.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Alan. Warren has a question for you about bringing in outside help.
Yeah, I just wondered whether there's a time and a place to bring in external people. You referred to PDGs coming in and assisting, or that was referred to earlier. But I'm thinking of professionals. Is there a time and a place to do that?
That's a great question. And I think there is more than one time and more than one place. And I don't know if Tari did this when she was starting her club, but when we started the first ever Veterans Club, we brought in an outside facilitator to find out what all these diverse individuals wanted. We had about 50 people. And it's funny because they all had a lot in common, but we didn't know that until we had this facilitation. And they decided what the principles, the columns of their club would be, which was peace and service. And there was one other, but they came up with common ground that they probably would not have been able to without an outside person being objective and just helping them along with the process. If you're going to make a big change, I think it does help to have outside facilitators come in. There's some zones, and I think zone 30 and 31 are particularly good with this. They have a visioning process where the district and the zones come in and they actually say, what do you want? And they have people shout out what they want. And then people go around and they put colored dots or they vote in some kind of way what they want to work on. And they decide together if membership growth is important to them. What is our goal? Because let's face it, to have a goal achieved, you really have to set that goal. Because if you don't have people talking about it and working on it, then it usually doesn't come to fruition. And then when it does come to fruition, you need to celebrate it. So I would say, kind of like the answer to my other question, Warren, do it now. Don't wait. There's no ideal time. The difference between a spark plug, we talked about a spark plug and we didn't talk about a perfectionist. A perfectionist is a person who waits till everything is actually perfect and then does it. We don't need perfectionists in Rotaries. We need spark plugs. We need people to start now and perfect as they go along. We don't have the luxury. This is especially true in Zone 8 and where I live in North America. We don't have the luxury of just sitting around. We have to be like Kira. We have to be like Andy. We have to be the people who have that gumption that move it forward, and we need to move it forward now. So bring in that expert now. And that expert doesn't have to be someone you pay. There are people in our clubs that are professional facilitators and we're not using them. Or if not in our club, maybe the club next door. And with Zoom, you could even do it virtually. Thank you, Warren, for that question. It's an important one.
Thanks, Warren, and thanks, Tom. Just observe here that we do have nearly 500 Rotary officers in Zone 8. Some amazing people there who, from my observations, are underutilised. Some are doing wonderful work, but there's a lot of great people there. But Johnny Dryden has another question for you about the application form. So over to you, please, Johnny.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't had Barbara come back to me out of Rotary Australia, Tom, so I'm going to take the opportunity to ask you the question. To register a satellite club, are we using the new Rotary Club application? Is that the application form to register a satellite club?
No, sir, it's not. There's 3 different applications. And I want to dispel a myth. When sometimes you go around and you listen to other people giving seminars and they say, oh, there's a lot of paperwork to fill out. There's not a lot to fill out. Satellite Club, there's 3 pages, and the last page is just simply a page of information for your members. So there's a new club application, which is 4 pages. Again, the last sheet is just information about your members. Address, telephone number. Do they want to receive the Rotarian in written form, electronic form? The key, Johnny, is you could go to Club and District Support and you could ask them for a spreadsheet, and you could easily just fill out that spreadsheet so you don't have to fill out a whole page information for each person. So regular club application, 4 pages. Rotary Club application, 4 pages. Satellite, it's only 3 pages. So, and it's not hard to fill out. A lot of it is just space between blanks. So, the officers, where you're going to meet, when you're going to meet, you're not required to have a web page unless you're an e-club. An e-club, they do require it. But thank you very much for that question, Johnny.
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Tom. Warwick has a question for you about conflict management policies. Over to you, please, Warwick.
Hi, Kira. Hi, Tom. Our district actually has a conflict management policy for clubs, which we hope we don't actually need, but on occasions it's necessary. The real problem seems to be that we don't align members' aspirations with the club culture, whatever that is. I mean, in the end, it's the members' expressed interest and Rotary's expressed values. We're an organisation which is values-based, the 4-way test, the service above self, the code of conduct. And those things often get treated as though they're completely irrelevant because the club wants to do something. If we turned it around and said these people are joining our organisation because their value set aligns with what our club and our organisation wants to do, we would probably end up with a different outcome. People join values-based organisations. They're not joining the traditional things that Rotary has seen. Have you seen anything systemic that's been done across Rotary to do values assessment? We've got a model that Western Australian University has come up with and working internationally, but I don't see anybody actually looking at that in terms of aligning members' views with our expressed values. And coming from a corporate culture where Myers-Briggs and Herman Brain dominance have been used in this sort of thing before, understanding people's different thinking styles and value sets gets rid of 90% of the conflict. And the 10% that's left is about a real discussion about choices. We don't seem to be getting down to that sort of understanding. We're faffing around at the margins about negotiating about things that are either core to our culture or about things that 90% of the members aren't interested in.
So, Warwick, thank you very much for bringing this up because you hit the nail right on the head. The reason why cultures don't get along and because we're losing people don't feel comfortable is because our values in Rotary aren't lining up with our actual actions in the club. And, to give you an example, what you are hearing today started out over a year ago. I received a call from Stephanie Urchick. She's a past trustee and past director. And she said, let's speak on something. Well, I was reading a book at this time, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's called the Rotary Club Murder Mystery. It's a fictional book written in the 90s where a DG is actually murdered the night before he speaks to a club. So I was reading this. So I sent her a copy and we were reading it. Now it's in the 90s, written by a Rotarian who's a college professor and an author. And it's just awful set of values when you're reading. You walk into the club, he sits at a table, there's 6 people at the table. They think it's diverse because they have 5 Presbyterians and 1 Lutheran, but of course, all white males. And they think they're open because they leave 1 seat open where someone else could join that's not the regular. So, I started mapping when I was reading this book of all the things that are just don't align with Rotary values. And then I was working with an individual here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's in the middle of the U.S., right below the Canadian border. We have a lot of Fortune 500, actually most per capita in the U.S., Fortune 500 companies in our state. And there's an individual I know, she used to work for General Mills, and she has a change management company for large corporations. So she helped us put together this seminar where first we listed all the values in Rotary, and we listed what we actually did. And we were going to do, when you do a seminar like this, you never want to point the finger at a club and say, you're doing it wrong, because, you never want to insult anyone. So we were going to use the hypotheticals in this book. Now, I decided not to do that because of copyright and that kind of thing. But we did go through the process of looking what our values are and what we actually do. And they don't match up in many clubs. And that's where the conflict is. So, Warwick, you're right. We do not have across Rotary a tool to do that assessment. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with this seminar. We can turn this in for your club or district, a 90-minute workshop where we go through hypotheticals and learn how to change a culture. But we're just trying to give you a taste of it today through Membership Voice. But thank you for the question.
Glenda's made a kind of a statement there, but I think there's a question embedded in the last part of that. Is there, Glenda?
No, there isn't, Kara. The important thing, I think, is to say if you do a club visioning, you must follow it and you must update it. And it could be every year or it could be every second year. And I think it's what the club actually wants. But the important statement is you've got to update it, because if you don't, like the club I'm leaving because of regional, they've lost their way. We club vision 6-7 years ago and haven't done anything about it since. So that's my comment. Goodbye.
How sad is that? Tom, did you have a comment to make there?
Carol, Glenda's 100% correct. When we talked about the change model, we talked about after you make the change, you have to reassess. And, you think about it, we're losing all these people. Back in 1996, 25 years ago, our average club size across the world was double what it is now. Mm-hmm. The only reason we're staying at the same number and slightly growing this year is because we're adding new clubs. We need to keep on changing and keep on adapting, or we won't survive. I mean, it was shocking to me during the closing of the International Convention when our current president of Rotary International, Shekhar Mehta, said, when you Google Rotary, or when you Google the top 10 service organizations, a lot of times Rotary doesn't appear. The models are changing. What Nikki Scott is doing with the hub, different club models, different flexibility in current clubs. We have to consider all these things because people have left Rotary, but when we say they left Rotary, Kiro, we're not saying they left the international organization. They left their club because their club didn't fit their schedule, their interests, or they just didn't like the culture. So we need to get our cultures correct, because that's the baseline. If we get our culture to where it is, people will invite people and we'll be fine. But if we get our culture so it's misaligned with Rotary values or the values of our individuals that they thought they were going to get when they joined, then we're never going to be able to grow. So we need to fix it first before we start inviting people.
Very true. And we're getting some interesting feedback through the Membership Voice series about some of the other things that might be impacting that. But Alan has another question here, and it's really interesting because it points to some of the things I'm talking about. Alan, your question, please.
Let me just get the... Tom, one of the things, when I was a bit younger, I joined Lions Club, and they were the hands-on club. They went out and planted trees and put in benches and so on in parks and put up signs. And we looked at the Rotary Club as the funding body. They raised the money, and they were the business people. They weren't hands-on. what I've experienced is, have we moved on from, as a now Rotarian for a long time, have we moved on from just business fundraising to actually being involved now, hands-on, wanting to get out there and do things? Have we changed? Has that culture changed that you're aware of?
Alan, cultures are different in different areas, even within the same zone. I was speaking the other day to Thailand, which is very much a culture, respect your elders, but also another district that was part of that zone event was Vietnam, which is change, all the way change. So, Alan, it's important that we engage our members. Nobody wants to join a club or stay in a club that doesn't do anything. So they join for service. And, there's always a debate among speakers as, are we a membership organization or are we a service organization? And the right answer is we're a membership organization because we have members and we do the best service of anyone in the world. The great thing about Rotary, Alan, is, other organizations, like in America, we have the Red Cross. I can write a check to the Red Cross and they go do what they want to do. But Rotary is the only organization, and I recently wrote an article for the Rotary magazine in Rotary Great Britain and Ireland on this. Rotary is the only organization that you can actually pick what you want to do, raise the money for it, do the project, report back, and you're in control of it. Everywhere else, you're paying the money and they're in control of it. Now, Alan, if you want to start your own nonprofit, you'd have to file paperwork, you'd have to raise the money, you'd have to do the work, you'd have to report back. But Rotary lets you do all that. And if you want to focus on one area, you can start a cause-based club in that one area. When we started our Veterans Club, within 3 weeks, they had $20,000 raised from district grants and other organizations to rebuild the first floor of a homeless vet shelter so they have a place to play pool and have that camaraderie and cards and Xbox and those kind of things. So Rotary gives you a network of 1.4 million. It's got a 116 plus year reputation. It's got the Rotary Foundation get you money. We don't need to start the Alan Briggs nonprofit for illiteracy. You could do it all through Rotary. We just have to let people know that they can do that. Thank you for the question.
That's interesting that you should say that, Tom, because Alan has actually started an environmentally based a cause called by the name of Tree Mission. So he's gone down that path for sure.
And if I can just say that I've previously through another club, a face-to-face club, exactly as you said, I stumbled on a cause. The club supported me. We ended up building, finished off a school building, built places for the staff and expanded health and hygiene facilities. So exactly as you've said, I've had that opportunity and I've really appreciated that through Rotary. So and I was a GSE into Thailand many years ago as well. So I'm familiar with their culture and interactions. So thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan, for all you do.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Alan. Warwick has a comment, but I'd still like him to run that past you. Warwick, over to you, please.
Hold on, I've got to go back to my previous comment. One of the issues that I think has been raised in several of the questions recently, that Rotary was an organisation when it was founded that was seen having a great deal of authenticity in the community. And I'm wondering whether we've really still got that, because we've been really good at hiding our light under a bushel. And the things that we're perceived as being are the things that are often seen as inauthentic. But the work that we've actually done, we're not told anybody about. How do we change that?
Warwick, that's an excellent question. And so much in Rotary, we focus, because we have these limited time to speak, we focus on just membership or just public image or just the Rotary Foundation. And our public image needs to be changed. Let's face it. I mean, we are people of action. We are influencers in our community. We are thought leaders. In our clubs, we have the mayors, we have the school superintendents, we have the elected officials. But what are we seen as? We're seen as people that go eat breakfast, eat lunch, and listen to a speaker. We need to take what we are doing and we need to put it in the public image about we need to brag on ourselves a little bit about the good work we're doing to make the world a better place. Now, it's going to happen this year because we have an inspirational leader in RI President-elect Jennifer Jones. And at International Assembly, she told us training leaders that we need to let our incoming district governors know that she's going to be on an impact tour. And she talked a little bit this also at the International Convention. She's going to go to 8 different areas, and she's going to focus on the 7 areas of focus plus polio. And she's going to bring bloggers with her. She's going to bring TV broadcasters, and each site she's going to bring a different kind of social influencer. And we're going to get that out. But what Jennifer Jones wants us to do is she wants our DGs like Tari to go out and do the same thing in our districts, highlight the good work we're doing, and don't just talk about we have a club meeting and a pancake breakfast. Thank you for bringing that up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Warwick. Tari, over to you, please.
Thank you. I think the biggest success in our new club is that we allows not the word. There's no rules really. That every single one of our 25 members currently does different things. We do come together on some things like Shelter Box. We certainly celebrate the foundation, and everyone gave this year to the foundation. But we didn't force everybody to say you have to give to the annual fund. Ironically, 2/3 gave to the annual fund, but a couple gave to the environment, gave to a global grant, because that piqued their interest. So we don't sort of say, you didn't give to the annual fund this year, you naughty type of thing, which sometimes I've heard out there. So we give them choices and options. And every one of these members, one gives blood as her service who lives somewhere else. Another one refurbishes bicycles and gives those. That's all he does really for Rotary other than support foundation. But then we celebrated all of it when we bring it back to the club to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tari. Now, Tom, at this stage, because I would normally ask you why you're a Rotarian, but you told me that fairly recently. What I'm going to finish up with this time is, what's the most significant thing for someone, in your view, the most significant thing for someone needing to change the culture of their club? What's the most significant thing for them to watch out for?
I think that the best thing for people to watch out for is apathy, complacency. You know, we saw during COVID, people say, well, it's COVID, we can't get anything done. It's COVID, we can't bring in new people. It's COVID, we can't start a new club. People have to make a change. They have to listen to their members. You know, there was a governor in the state of New York here in the US that would go around and say, how am I doing? How am I doing? It's important for us to ask our club members, how are we doing as leaders? Is Rotary answering your needs? And if not, we need to change it. We made a promise that we would make that product, the club experience, something that they would be proud of. We need to do it. The biggest risk is the complacency of not doing anything and not considering a change. Thank you for the question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Past Governor Tom. I think we've had an absolutely fantastic presentation and Q&A tonight. We've certainly made Tom sort of work for it after he got up at 2 o'clock in the morning for this. So, okay, let's give Tom a huge round of applause. So, yeah, well done, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely fantastic.
Could I just give a quote before we leave, because we've had a very traumatic exit from our club, but we've managed to build it back up, and by the end of June, we will recruit 6 new members, which has just been done in the last 6 weeks. So one of the quotes that I would like to leave with you: life is like a camera, and so is Rotary. Focus on what's important, capture the good times, develop from the negatives, and if things don't work out, take another shot.
Yep.
Super.
Well done.
Thanks, Linda. And it's great to hear that Hillary's is on a huge rebound.
Yeah.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Everyone, thank you for being with us tonight. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful.
Thank you so
Lovely
much.
to see you, Tom. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Bye.
seeing you all. Take care. Have a great day.